They invited the poor maid to mock her, but the ALFAP king rose to his feet like he'd seen a goddess. The grand hall of Moonshadow Palace shimmered in gold and crystal. Light from thousands of candles danced across the polished marble floors, reflecting in the intricate patterns of stained glass windows. Nobles in flowing robes and jeweled crowns gathered around long tables, laughter echoing like the ringing of fine silver bells. The scent of spiced meats and freshly baked bread filled the air, yet beneath the splendor lingered an undercurrent of arrogance and cruelty. In the midst of this grandeur, a small figure moved silently. Elara, the maid, carried a tray of goblets with trembling hands. Her dress, patched and faded, marked her clearly as someone of humble origin. Her dark hair, loosely tied, brushed against her shoulders as she walked. She lowered her gaze, hoping her presence would go unnoticed, praying the nobles would pay her no mind. It was impossible. The moment her delicate feet entered the hall, whispers began, soft at first, then growing louder. "Look at her dress. She wears rags to a palace feast," one noble sneered. "She thinks she belongs here?" Another laughed, his voice sharp and cruel. Alara's stomach twisted. She had faced ridicule before, in villages and markets, but never in a place so grand, so filled with power. She kept her hand steady, gripping the tray, her mind repeating a single thought: do not cry, do not stumble, just serve and leave. Then, as she placed the goblets before the nearest guests, a hush fell over the room. A figure rose from his throne, King Kale, the Alpha King of Moonshadow. His presence was magnetic, overwhelming. Even the bravest nobles fell silent, their laughter dying in their throats. Kale was tall, his frame commanding, yet there was something in the set of his shoulders, the sharpness of his gaze, that hinted at a storm beneath calm waters. Dark hair framed a face that could inspire loyalty or fear. His eyes, silver like moonlight on steel, locked onto Elara with a stare that made her heart skip a beat. The court waited, breathless, as Kale took a step forward. "Leave the tray," he commanded, his voice low, resonant, carrying the weight of authority. Elara froze, unsure if she had heard correctly. All eyes were on her, the whispers now replaced by a tension that made the hall feel impossibly small. I, she stammered, clutching the tray as if it were a lifeline. Kale's gaze did not waver. Step closer. Her legs felt like lead, but she obeyed, moving forward as if pulled by some invisible force. When she was only a few paces away, the king leaned forward slightly, his eyes studying her. There was no mockery there, no cruelty, only something that made her breath catch: reverence. The nobles exchanged confused glances. Whispers started again, but this time edged with disbelief. "The maid?" one asked softly. "The king, he is impressed?" Elara's cheeks burned. She could not understand what she had done to command such attention. She had only been doing her duty, moving silently among lords and ladies, serving the food and drink of the court, and yet here he stood, rising from his throne as if she were a goddess. Kale's lips curved slightly, a smile that did not reach his eyes, but still carried warmth. "You will remain by my side for the evening," he declared. The room erupted into shocked murmurs, and some of the nobles tried to protest. "She's a servant!" one cried. "This is not proper!" Kale's gaze sharpened, and the hall fell silent once more. "Proper is determined by the crown," he said, his voice slicing through the chatter. "And tonight she is here by my command." Elara's heart raced. She could hardly believe what was happening. She wanted to protest, to refuse, to run and hide somewhere behind the kitchens, but something in Kale's eyes held her in place. It was a look that could break stone, a look that demanded truth and honesty, a look that seemed to see her very soul. As she moved to his side, the nobles' murmurs grew into a low hum of disbelief. Some looked jealous, some looked frightened. None dared question the king further. The evening continued, but the dynamics of the hall had shifted. Where once she had been invisible, now all eyes were on her, measuring her, guessing her worth. And all the while, Kale watched, his attention unwavering, as if she alone existed in the grand hall of the palace. Elara felt a strange mix of fear and curiosity. The power he radiated was intoxicating, yet terrifying. She could sense that he carried burdens she could not comprehend. Responsibilities, curses, battles fought in silence, and perhaps loneliness deeper than she could imagine. And yet, despite all that, he had risen for her, a mere maid. She remembered stories whispered among village children, tales of kings who could command storms, who could bend nations to their will. None of those stories had prepared her for this. None had described a king whose gaze could pierce her very being, whose presence could make her feel both insignificant and sacred at once. Cale leaned slightly closer, his voice barely above a whisper, though it carried in her ears like music. "Do you know who you are, Maid?" I am no one, my king," she said softly, bowing her head. His gaze softened just a fraction, but only a fraction. "Do not speak so lightly of yourself. There is strength in humility, but there is also power in knowing your worth. You will learn that with time." The nobles watched, fascinated and unsettled. The maid, so small and so plain in their eyes, was under the king's protection. Some felt admiration, some felt envy, some plotted quietly, already wondering how they could turn this strange favor to their advantage. As the feast went on, Elara served quietly, keeping her distance but never leaving Cale's side. She noticed small details, the way he carried himself, the subtle commands he gave with a tilt of his hand, the way his eyes sometimes drifted to a far window, as if seeing something beyond the palace walls. She wanted to ask him, to know his secrets, but the words never came. Fear mingled with fascination, and she could only watch. Then, as dessert was served, Cale rose again. This time he spoke to the entire court. "Tonight," he said, his voice echoing, "we honor courage, honesty, and dignity. Qualities often overlooked in those who wear no crown, yet possess a heart that shines brighter than any jewel." He looked directly at Elara. "Let her example remind us all that power is not measured by title or wealth, but by spirit and courage." The hall fell into stunned silence. Nobles looked at each other, unsure how to respond. Elara's heart raced. She could feel tears threatening to spill. She had never imagined being praised, let alone in front of such powerful people. Cale returned to his throne, and Elara knelt slightly, unsure what she had earned or what was expected of her next. The king's gaze remained on her, steady and unwavering. She felt as if she were on the edge of something, a precipice of change, of destiny, of magic she had not yet understood. Suddenly a shadow flickered at the edge of the hall. Elara's pulse quickened. It was brief, barely noticeable, but enough to make her shiver. Cale noticed it too, his eyes narrowing, silver light flickering in their depths. He rose again, silently this time, moving closer to her, shielding her with a subtle shift of his presence. The nobles did not see the danger, only a king walking beside a maid. But Elara did. Her intuition, honed by years of surviving in the world's harsh corners, sensed something ancient and watching, something that was not entirely human. Cale whispered, his voice low and commanding, "Stay close. Do not be afraid." Elara nodded, though she did not fully understand. She trusted him in a way that surprised her, though she had never known him before this night. There was something about the strength in his voice, the certainty in his presence, that made her feel protected, even in a hall full of powerful nobles and hidden threats. As the feast drew to a close, Elara was finally allowed to leave the main hall. Her legs were unsteady, her heart still racing from the king's attention and the strange shadow she had sensed. She returned to the servants' quarters, glancing back at the hall one last time. Cale remained seated, his gaze distant, as if he were thinking of far-off places, of battles and burdens, of curses unseen. Elara could not sleep that night. She lay on her small cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. She could not understand why the king had singled her out, why he had risen for her, why he had protected her without explanation. and yet she felt a strange stirring in her chest, a mixture of fear, excitement, and the faintest flicker of hope. Somewhere deep within her something had awakened, a sense of destiny, a whisper of power, a feeling that her life would never be the same. And perhaps, she thought with both awe and fear, she would not be able to return to the world she had known before. Outside the palace, the night wind carried secrets across the kingdom. The moon shone silver and cold, and shadows moved where no light reached. Ilara felt them, a reminder that her journey had only just begun. And somewhere, deep in the heart of Moonshadow Palace, King Kale watched the night, thinking of the maid who had changed everything with a single step into his hall. The evening had ended, but the story, their story, was only beginning. The morning sun poured through the tall arched windows of Moonshadow Palace, scattering gold across the polished marble floors. The grand hall, which had been alive with laughter and whispers the night before, now stood silent, bathed in soft light. The servants scurried about, carrying trays of breakfast, polishing silver, and adjusting tapestries. Yet amidst the hum of ordinary life, one maid moved differently, carefully, purposefully. Ilara had slept little, her mind still tangled in the memories of the previous night. She remembered the hush that fell over the court, the whispers that stopped when King Kale rose, and the intensity of his gaze that had seemed to look straight through her. Even now, recalling it made her cheeks flush and her stomach tighten. Something about him unsettled her, and yet drew her closer. A magnet she could neither resist nor understand. Ilara's day began like any other, tending to chores, polishing silver, arranging flowers. But the air around her was different. Every glance from the nobles reminded her of her place in their world, fragile, unnoticed. But Kale's presence hovered like a shadow at the edge of her awareness, a silent promise that nothing would ever be simple again. She was called to the king's private chambers before midday. Her hand shook slightly as she approached, the polished floors reflecting her own uncertain expression. Kale stood by the window, the light casting long shadows across his face, highlighting the sharpness of his jaw and the intensity in his silver eyes. "Good morning, Ilara," he said, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of command. "You need not fear me."
"You are safe here."
Ilara bowed her head, unsure if it was relief or anxiety that made her pulse quicken. "Thank you, my king," she whispered. Kale gestured for her to rise. "Walk with me," he said. And so, they moved through the quiet halls together. It was strange, the way he walked beside her. He was the Alpha King, feared by his own court, a man whose very name could bend nations. Yet beside him, she felt seen. They entered a smaller chamber, walls lined with books and maps, shelves stacked with scrolls tied in golden ribbons. The room smelled faintly of lavender and parchment. Kale gestured for her to sit on a bench near the window. "Tell me, Ilara," he began, leaning casually against the sill. "Do you know why you are here?" I do not, my king. I only serve as I am told." Kale's eyes softened, though they did not lose their piercing intensity. "It is not enough to serve blindly," he said. "Some are called for a purpose they cannot yet understand. You are one of those few." The word startled her. Purpose? She was a maid. She had been born to scrape floors, carry trays, and stay invisible. And yet, the king's words seemed to ripple through the air. A promise and a warning at once. "Why me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's gaze darkened, and for a moment he seemed distant, lost in thought. "There is strength in you," he said finally, "a courage that is hidden beneath humility. I sensed it the moment you entered my hall. It is rare and dangerous." Ilara felt a shiver run down her spine. Dangerous? Her life had always been hard, but she had never imagined herself as dangerous. Yet something in Kale's tone suggested he spoke of more than physical threats. The conversation was interrupted by a soft sound, a rustle at the edge of the chamber. Ilara's head turned instinctively. Nothing moved in the light, yet the hairs on her arms stood on end. Shadows seemed to flicker unnaturally along the walls. Kyle noticed her reaction immediately. He stepped closer, the space between them charged with a strange energy. "Do not fear what you do not understand," he said. His voice was low, commanding yet protective. "Some forces are old, older than the palace, older than my crown. They watch, they wait, but they will not touch you while I am near."
Elara swallowed hard.
Her heart raced, and she realized that beside him, she felt both safe and aware of a new, trembling fear, the kind that prickled along the spine, warning her of something vast and unseen. They spent hours walking through the palace together, Kale showing her hidden rooms, secret corridors, and libraries filled with ancient knowledge. Every word he spoke revealed a fragment of his world, a world of curses, of power struggles, and of the unseen threads that tied the kingdom together. Yet despite his authority, there was a loneliness in him, a quiet ache beneath the armor of his rule. Elara could not help but notice it. She saw the way his shoulders slumped when he thought no one was watching, the fleeting moments when his expression softened, as if remembering something lost. And in those moments she felt drawn to him, not just by fear or fascination, but by a growing awareness that he too was searching for something he could not name. As evening approached, Kale led her to the balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and violet. The scent of jasmine floated up from the flowers below. "Elara," he said, turning to her, "you must understand that your presence here is not without consequence. The court is not kind to those who rise above their station. Many will seek to harm you, to diminish you. You must be careful." Her eyes met his, and for the first time she did not feel like a maid. She felt seen, respected, and against her better judgment something more, a flicker of warmth, a quiet longing that she could not name. "I will be careful, my king," she said, though her voice trembled slightly. Kale's gaze lingered on her longer than necessary. "No," he said softly. "You must not simply be careful. You must be strong. There are powers in this world that you have yet to meet. Some will try to use you. Some will try to destroy you. And some will be drawn to you for reasons they do not understand." The wind lifted her hair, and she felt the words resonate deep within her. There was a weight in them, a promise of trials and tests she had never imagined. Suddenly, the wind shifted, and with it, a shadow seemed to pass across the garden below. Elara froze, sensing movement that did not belong. Kale's eyes narrowed, and he placed a protective hand lightly on her shoulder. "Do you feel that?" he asked. She nodded, unable to speak. Her senses, sharpened by years of survival, told her there was something lurking. Not human, yet not entirely absent. A presence ancient and patient, watching. Kale's jaw tightened. "You are not alone," he said, "and you are not powerless." Elara's mind reeled. Not powerless? She had always believed herself small, invisible, irrelevant. But beside him, with his hand on her shoulder, she felt potential. A strange energy thrummed in her veins, a whisper of something she did not yet understand. Kale turned his gaze back to the horizon. The night will come, and with it tests you cannot yet imagine. "But I will guide you if you let me. Do you trust me?" Elara hesitated. Trust was not something she gave lightly, not after years of being ignored and underestimated. And yet, looking into his silver eyes, she felt a pull stronger than fear.
A pull that told her this king, this man, could protect her, and perhaps even see the power within her before she did. I trust you, my king," she said finally. A flicker of a smile passed across Kale's face, brief but genuine.
"Good," he said. "Then we begin." The hours passed with lessons and observations. Kale tested her awareness, her ability to notice details others overlooked. He spoke of history, of battles fought and alliances forged, of curses that lingered like shadows in the corners of the kingdom. Elara listened, absorbing knowledge as if it were sunlight. Each story revealed both the danger and the potential of the world she had been thrust into. Yet the night brought more than lessons. As the moon rose, casting silver light across the palace, Elara felt a stirring within her, a pulse of energy, subtle but undeniable, as if something deep inside her had awakened. She had always been ordinary, or so she thought. And yet now she sensed a hidden strength, something raw and untamed, waiting for guidance. Cale noticed the change. He did not speak of it, but his gaze lingered longer than before, as if acknowledging the spark within her. And in that silent recognition, Elara felt a mixture of fear and excitement. She did not understand what she was becoming, but she knew it was not by accident. The first night ended with Cale escorting her back to the servants' quarters. The corridors were quiet, empty of the chatter and clinking of dishes that filled the day. The palace seemed to hold its breath. Before leaving, Cale bent slightly toward her. "Rest tonight," he said softly. "Tomorrow we continue. You will learn more than you ever imagined." Elara nodded, her heart heavy with anticipation. She lay down on her small cot, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Cale's words echoed in her ears. Strength, potential, unseen powers, tests to come. And in the shadows outside, something ancient watched. It had sensed her awakening, sensed the pull of Cale's presence, and her own emerging power. The night was no longer quiet. It was alive with possibility, with danger, with secrets that would soon demand to be faced. Elara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her new reality. She was no longer merely a maid. She was a player in a game of kings, curses, and destiny, and she could feel the pull of Cale beside her, like a silent promise that whatever came, she would not face it alone. The palace woke with an uneasy air. The sun had barely risen when whispers began in the halls of Moonshadow Palace. Nobles, servants, and guards all seemed to move with hushed urgency, glancing furtively at one another. Elara could feel the tension the moment she stepped into the corridors. The nobles no longer laughed outright at her. Their murmurs were sharper now, edged with suspicion and jealousy. Her presence beside King Cale had shifted the balance of the court. Elara carried trays of food, her hands steady despite the weight of countless eyes watching her. Every glance reminded her she was no longer just a maid. She was a symbol, whether she wanted it or not, and with that status came danger. Cale summoned her to the private chambers again. This time his expression was grave. His silver eyes, always intense, now held the weight of caution and concern. "Sit," he commanded softly. "We need to speak." Elara obeyed, her pulse quickening. She had grown accustomed to his presence, to the silent tension that always seemed to hover between them, yet every moment spent with him carried its own power. "The court grows restless," Cale began. "Many see your closeness to me as unnatural. Some envy it, others fear it, and a few will try to harm you."
Her heart tightened.
"Harm me? Why would they do that?"
I've done nothing to anyone.
"They will not reason with you. Some are motivated by ambition, others by fear of forces they do not understand. You carry a spark they cannot see but sense. That spark makes you dangerous in their eyes." Elara frowned, trying to comprehend.
A spark? What do you mean?
Cale rose, walking slowly to the window. Moonlight, pale and silver, spilled into the room, highlighting the lines of tension on his face. "Do you feel it? The way the air shifts around you? The way shadows seem to linger a moment longer than they should?"
Elara swallowed hard.
She had sensed it. The faint thrum of energy that had stirred within her. The subtle awareness that something beyond the ordinary had awakened. But she had not known it had a name or a meaning.
You have power, Cale said, his voice low, almost reverent. A power that is rare, ancient.
It is connected to this kingdom in ways you cannot yet understand, and it is drawing attention. Dangerous attention. Fear clawed at her chest. "I am just a maid," she whispered. "How can I have power?" Pale turned to her, eyes unwavering. Power is not given by birth or station. It is awakened by courage, by choices, by the heart. You have already shown bravery even in the face of mockery. That is the first sign. Before she could respond, a servant hurried in, bowing quickly. Your Majesty, the northern gate. There's been movement. Shadows, figures, they do not belong. Kael's expression hardened, and without another word, he strode from the room. Elara followed instinctively, though her mind raced with questions. Outside, the courtyard was bathed in moonlight, and the wind carried a chill that seemed unnatural. At the northern gate, shadows moved like living smoke. Guards shouted orders, forming lines, but their fear was clear. Elara, Ael said, turning to order. Stay behind me. Watch and learn. Even as he spoke, she felt the pull of the strange energy within her. It pulsed in her veins, a rhythm she could neither ignore nor control. She realized with a sudden clarity that this power was tied to her emotions. Fear, courage, and determination made it stronger. Figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked in darkness. They did not speak, but the air around them was thick with menace. Kael moved forward, commanding the energy around him like a shield. Elara's pulse raced as she realized that these were not ordinary intruders. They were something older, something connected to the dark forces he had hinted at. Her instincts screamed, and before she could think, her hands lifted slightly. A ripple of energy flowed from her, faint but tangible. The shadows recoiled as if stung. Kael's eyes widened slightly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. She had acted instinctively, and it had worked. The figures fled into the night, leaving only whispers behind. Kael turned to her, his expression a mixture of surprise and pride. You have felt it. That was your power. It is stronger than you think, Elara, and it will grow. Elara's mind whirled. She had only wanted to serve, to survive, to remain invisible. And yet here she was, standing beside a king, feeling strength she had never imagined, and realizing that her life had changed forever. The next days were filled with training, both subtle and intense. Kael guided her in understanding her abilities, teaching her awareness, focus, and control. He did not rush her, but his presence was relentless, a constant force shaping her growth. At night, they would walk the palace gardens in silence, the air thick with unspoken tension. Sometimes Kael would speak of his past, battles, losses, betrayals, and Elara would listen, feeling the weight of the man behind the crown. Other times she would speak of her childhood, of the hardships she had faced, and he would listen with a quiet intensity that made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. There were moments when their hands brushed, brief and electric, leaving a warmth that lingered long after the touch. Elara felt a flutter of something she did not yet name. Desire, perhaps, or the pull of destiny intertwining their paths. She knew she must be careful. The court's eyes were everywhere, and any hint of closeness could be twisted into scandal or used as a weapon. One evening, as a crimson sunset bathed the palace in gold, Kael led her to the tower balcony overlooking the northern forests. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant snow. Tonight, he said, we will test more than your control. We will test your courage. There are forces at work you have yet to meet, shadows that wait in the corners of this world. You will face them. Elara's heart beat fast. I am ready, she said, though doubt gnawed at her. Kael studied her, his gaze intense. Do not think bravery is the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. Remember that. The night fell, dark and velvet. In the garden below, shadows coiled and shifted, moving with intent. Elara followed Kael into the labyrinth of hedges, her senses alert. The air felt charged, electric, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Suddenly, a shadow lunged from the darkness, a shape too quick, too silent to be human. Elara's pulse surged. Kael moved to intercept, but instinctively she lifted her hands. A burst of energy, bright and warm, flared from her, striking the shadow and sending it tumbling backward. Kael's eyes widened. Well done, he said softly. You acted without hesitation. That is the first true test. Ellora's chest heaved. Fear had driven her, yet she had felt the power surge inside her, stronger than anything she had imagined. And in that surge, she had glimpsed the truth. She was no longer merely a maid. She was becoming something more, something tied to Kale, to the palace, to the fate of the kingdom. As they returned to the tower, Kale spoke in a quieter voice. You will not be alone in this. I will guide you, protect you, and teach you. But you must also understand, there will be sacrifices. You may be tested in ways you cannot yet imagine, and some may demand more than courage. They may demand your heart, your loyalty, your very essence.
Elara's mind spun.
Loyalty, heart, essence, words heavy with meaning. And yet, even as fear stirred, there was a part of her that leapt toward the challenge. She had survived hardship before. She had endured cruelty and neglect. And now, beside a king who saw her, who respected her, she felt a spark of something fierce and untamable. Days passed into nights, and with each test her strength grew. The court watched in silent astonishment as the maid who had once been mocked now moved with confidence, her presence commanding attention without a word. She learned to read the energy of the palace, to sense the whispers of shadows, and to harness the power that had awakened within her. But the greatest change was not in her abilities. It was in her heart. The quiet longing she had felt for Kale deepened, mingled with respect, trust, and a tentative hope. She knew the danger of such feelings, yet she could not deny them. Every look, every gesture, every silent understanding between them pulled her closer, binding her not just to her power, but to the king himself. One night as they stood on the tower balcony once more, the moon casting silver light over the palace, Kale spoke in a voice low and tender. Elara, there are secrets I have not told you, dangers that lie ahead, and enemies who watch us even now. You have proven your courage, but the true trials are yet to come. Then I will face them, my king, she said, her voice steady, carrying a determination she had not known she possessed. Kale's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, the walls of power and fear melted away, leaving only two souls standing together against a world filled with shadow and uncertainty. The night was quiet, yet beneath the stillness something stirred. In the deepest corners of the kingdom, unseen eyes watched, sensing the awakening power of a maid and the rising strength of a king. The winds whispered secrets, carrying warnings and promises alike. And Elara knew, with a certainty that made her breath catch, that nothing would ever be the same. The tests, the trials, the sacrifices, they were only beginning. The night hung heavy over Moonshadow Palace, thick with mist and quiet anticipation. Shadows moved among the towers and gardens, twisting unnaturally in the pale moonlight. Elara stood at the edge of the highest balcony, her cloak clutched tightly around her shoulders, her eyes scanning the darkness. She could feel it, the pulse of power that had awakened within her, steady and insistent, mingling with the energy that surrounded the palace. She was not alone. Beside her stood King Kale, his silver eyes sharp, his presence commanding and protective. Together they had faced tests, challenges, and the strange stirrings of power in the shadows. And yet tonight felt different. The air trembled with expectation, as if the kingdom itself held its breath. Kale's voice broke the silence, low and certain. Elara, the forces that have watched you, tested you, and sought to harm you, they have gathered. This is the moment they will act. You must be ready not only with strength, but with your heart. Elara nodded. She could feel fear prickling at the edges of her resolve, but it was tempered by determination. She had trained, learned, and awakened powers she had never dreamed of. And she had Kale by her side, not as a protector alone, but as an ally, a partner in this battle that stretched beyond swords and shields, beyond crowns and politics, into the very essence of their world. Below, in the palace courtyard, figures moved silently, cloaked, shadowed, their presence unnatural and deliberate. These were not ordinary enemies. Their forms shifted with a darkness that seemed alive, curling and writhing as they approached the gates. Kale stepped forward, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Remember what you have learned. Trust your instincts. And trust me." Elara's pulse quickened. She had learned to trust herself in ways she had never known. But trusting KL was different. There was a bond forming between them, silent yet unshakable. She felt it in every brush of his hand, every glance that lingered, every subtle instruction that guided her, without demanding. The shadows descended on the courtyard, moving with precision. Kale drew his sword, its blade reflecting the moonlight like liquid silver. He did not speak, did not hesitate. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, yet fluid, like a dance older than the palace itself. Elara lifted her hands instinctively, feeling the surge of power within her respond. A glow, soft but undeniable, radiated outward, surrounding her in a cocoon of warmth and light. The shadows hissed, recoiling from the force, but they were relentless. They pressed forward, testing the boundaries of her energy, probing for weakness. Kale's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Hold your ground! Let your courage guide the power." Elara's hands shook, but she focused. She drew on every lesson Kale had taught her. Awareness, concentration, trust in herself, trust in the energy flowing through her. She felt it expand, not just around her but within her. It was as if the kingdom itself responded to her awakening, lending strength to her resolve. A shadow surged forward, larger than the rest, its form almost human but warped with darkness. It lunged at Kale, faster than any sword could strike. Elara's instincts flared. She extended her hands, and a wave of light erupted, striking the shadow. It howled, dissipating into smoke and leaving only a faint trace of darkness lingering in the air. Kyle moved swiftly, cutting through the remaining figures with precise strikes. Yet it was not brute force alone that defeated them. It was the unity of their power. Kale's strength and skill combined with Elara's awakening energy. Together they were a force that neither shadows nor curses could contain. As the last shadow fled into the forest beyond, silence settled over the palace. The mist hung thick and still, and the stars reflected in the courtyard's polished stones. Elara's hands trembled, her energy dimming slowly as exhaustion washed over her. She had never felt power like this before, nor the exhaustion that followed its use. Yet in her chest a fierce glowing warmth remained, a sense that she had claimed something greater than herself. Kale approached, his sword sheathed, and placed a steady hand on her arm. "You have done well," he said, his voice carrying pride and something deeper, something she could not yet name. "You faced fear. You embraced your power, and you did not falter."
Elara looked up at him, her chest heaving.
I never knew I could do this," she admitted. "I never knew I had it in me." Kale's silver eyes softened. "Strength is discovered, not given, and courage is born from necessity. You have both, in ways that even I did not expect. You are more than a maid. You are extraordinary." A warmth rose in Elara's cheeks, but it was not pride alone. There was something in his words, something in his gaze, that made her heart flutter. It was not fear, not hesitation, but the quiet spark of connection, the realization that her journey was no longer solitary. The following days were filled with preparation. The shadows had been driven back, but Kale knew their forces were only scattered, not destroyed. There was a greater threat lurking in the darkness, one tied to ancient curses and old grievances. Elara trained with him, honing her power, learning to weave her energy into protection, defense, and subtle offense. But it was not just training that bound them together. Between lessons, they spoke of dreams, regrets, and the weight of expectations. Kale shared stories of battles fought and lost, of crowns that bore curses and kingdoms that fell to greed. Elara spoke of survival, of the quiet courage needed to endure a life without privilege or recognition. Each story wove a connection between them, a mutual respect that slowly deepened into something more. One evening, as snow began to fall gently over the palace, Kale led her to the chamber where the family's ancient records were kept. Scrolls and tomes lined the walls, filled with secrets older than the palace itself. "Here lies the origin of the curse," he said softly, unrolling a parchment carefully. "Generations of kings, including my line, have been bound by it. Only someone with your gift, Ilara, could awaken the balance necessary to break it."
Alara's eyes widened. Me?
How can I? I'm just learning to control what I have. How can I break a curse that has lasted centuries? Kale reached out, placing a hand over hers. Because the curse is tied not only to power, but to the heart. And the heart you have shown, courage, compassion, loyalty, is stronger than the magic that has trapped my line. You will not face this alone. Together, we will undo it.
Her chest tightened.
The weight of responsibility pressed on her, yet it was tempered by the knowledge that she was not alone. Kale's presence was steady, unwavering, and in that steadiness she found courage. The night of the final ritual arrived. The palace was silent, the moon casting silver light over the gardens where shadows had gathered once more. Elara stood beside Kale, hands linked, hearts beating in synchrony. She could feel the energy pulsing through the earth, the sky, and within herself, merging with Kale's own force to create a bond stronger than fear. As the ritual began, darkness surged from the edges of the gardens, figures formed of shadow and malice seeking to prevent them from completing the spell. Ilara raised her hands, drawing on every lesson, every ounce of courage, every spark of power. Light flowed outward, meeting the darkness head-on. Kale moved with her, their energies intertwining, weaving a pattern of force and protection that held the shadows at bay. Time seemed to stretch, the world narrowing to the pulse of their combined power. Energy flared, wind whipped, and the shadows roared in protest. And then, in a burst of silver light that reflected off the palace walls and bathed the courtyard in brilliance, the darkness shattered. The curse that had lingered for generations dissolved, leaving the night quiet and still once more. Ilara stumbled, exhausted, but Kale's hand steadied her. Their eyes met, and in that moment words were unnecessary. They had faced fear, embraced power, and emerged victorious. The bond between them was no longer subtle or tentative. It was forged in fire, trust, and shared courage. The court watched in awe as the maid who had once been mocked now stood beside the king, radiant and unafraid. The nobles could not deny the transformation, not just in her, but in Kale as well. The king who had been feared and distant now carried warmth and respect, his strength tempered by compassion and connection. Ilara looked at him, and he smiled softly. "You see," he said quietly, "you were never powerless. You were always extraordinary." Tears threatened to spill, but she held them back. She had grown, faced darkness, and discovered the depth of her own courage. And in the glow of moonlight, she felt a sense of peace, tempered with the knowledge that challenges would continue, but that she would never face them alone. As dawn broke over Moonshadow Palace, casting light over towers and gardens, the kingdom seemed to breathe anew. The curse was gone, but the bond forged between Ilara and Kale remained, unbroken, unyielding, and radiant. And in the quiet corners of the palace, whispers spoke of a maid who had risen above mockery, of a king who had found strength in partnership, and of a bond that would shape the destiny of the kingdom for generations to come. Ilara and Kale stood side by side on the balcony, watching the sun rise. The air was crisp, clean, and alive with possibility. No longer merely a maid, no longer merely a king. Together, they were something greater. And as the world stretched before them, full of challenges and wonders, they stepped forward, ready to face the future, their hearts, courage, and destiny intertwined forever.